My end. Okay, welcome. Welcome to the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Centers of Nassau County's program, China's Crimes Against Humanity and the Enslavement of the Uyghur People. My name is Thorin Tritter, and I am the Museum and Programming Director at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. Let me take this screen down so you can see us. Before I talk more about our program and our speakers, I want to recognize and thank our three co-sponsors, the Islamic Center of Long Island, the Social Justice Committee of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock, and the Nassau County Office of Asian American Affairs. I'm very grateful for their help in bringing this program to fruition. The title for our program today is a mouthful. We're talking about crimes against humanity, a crime that we associate with the Nuremberg trials after the Holocaust, when it became the basis of a prosecution for the first time in history. Indeed, one reason why we, the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, are drawing attention to what's happening to the Uyghur minority population in China is because of our organization's focus on the history of the Holocaust. But our interest is not only about the Holocaust. The Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center's mission is broader than that. We are committed as an institution to teaching about the dangers of not only anti-Semitism, but also racism, bullying, and all manifestations of intolerance. And our mission is to promote resistance to prejudice and to advocate respect for every human being. However, our historic interest inspires our contemporary activism. We know that 80 years ago, as the Holocaust was being planned and implemented, word started to leak out of Europe about the incarceration of Jews in ghettos and mass murder. But a combination of doubts about those sources, general disbelief, and anti-Semitism combined to undermine an effective response that might have stopped the Nazi genocide. When we look back, we wish America and the world had acted or screamed or raised its communal voice in protest in 1941 and 1942 as gas chambers and crematoria were built and put to use. But instead, the world largely remained silent. Today, we recognize that we cannot repeat that failed response. When we see the signs of genocide, we must leap to action, spread the word, and not let history repeat itself. We have two speakers today who are working to do exactly that, as they share information about events taking place in Western China, where it's not Jews who are the target of ethnic cleansing, but the Uyghur Muslim minority. One more comment before I introduce them, and that is a more logistical one. I want to ask that if you have questions during our program, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to type in questions, and we will make sure that you can, we'll make sure that we can respond. I see somebody saying that there's trouble hearing me. I hope that everybody can hear me okay. It looks like it should be. So I'll hope that it's a system problem at your end. My microphone appears to be working. Anyway, we will make sure to set aside time for the Q&A at the end of the program. Thank you for letting me know others can hear me. Okay, so with that, let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Adrian Zenz, an anthropologist who earned his doctorate at the University of Cambridge in 2010. He now serves as a senior fellow in China Studies at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation in Washington, D.C., and supervises PhD students at the European School of Culture and Theology in Germany. His research focuses on China's ethnic policy, minority education systems, and public recruitment practiced in Tibetan and Uyghur regions that has made him a leading figure in the field. He's spoken at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C., his work has been published in the New York Times, and he's given testimony before Congress. He's going to provide us with a broad overview of what's taking place in China. Our second speaker, who I'll introduce now, will be Rushan Abbas, the founder of Campaign for Uyghurs, an organization that promotes human rights and democratic freedoms for Uyghurs. Originally from East Turkestan, she was a student activist at Xinjiang University in the late 1980s, which has continued to shape her interests. After moving to the United States in 1989, she has continually sought for ways to engage with the Uyghur community. In 1993, she co-founded the California-based Uyghur Overseas Students and Scholars Association. And in 1998, when Radio Free Asia launched Uyghur Service, she was the first Uyghur reporter broadcasting daily to the Uyghur region. She regularly appears on media outlets to advocate for the Uyghur cause and gives public speeches in universities and think tanks. And I know she's going to offer a more personal assessment of the situation going on right now. So with that, let me pass the baton over to Dr. Zenz to lead us off. Dr. Zenz?
Well, thank you so much for having me and for your interest in this extremely pertinent and developing human rights atrocity in this remote Central Asian region of Northwest China. I will be sharing a PowerPoint presentation. Unfortunately, my screen sharing is still disabled at this point, it says.
Sorry, that should be working now.
Yes, thank you. I will be presenting approximately 20 minutes by PowerPoint on the subject. We're talking about the region of Xinjiang, as referred to by China, referred to also as East Turkestan by especially the Muslim Uyghur majority. Xinjiang was occupied by China by Mao Zedong in 1949. It is a culturally Central Asian region in northwestern China, right north of Tibet, bordering 8 Central Asian countries, Russia, Mongolia. Xinjiang is primarily home to 11 to 12 million Uyghurs, but also to a number of Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Tajik, and other predominantly Muslim ethnic minorities. The Uyghurs and other ethnic groups in Xinjiang are culturally much closer to Istanbul than they are to Beijing. They are a Central Asian people with a culture, a language, and a spirituality that is entirely distinct from the Chinese Han majority population. This has for a long time been an underlying issue, these cultural and religious differences. In 2009, as some of you might have heard, this erupted in some of the largest and most violent clashes between the Han Chinese and the Uyghurs in the capital of Xinjiang, of Urumqi, in 2009, 1 year after the Lhasa riots in Tibet. So what has happened since then has been the establishment of an unprecedented campaign of policing Uyghur descent and of suppressing it and surveying it. In 2013, the region of Xinjiang increased significantly in terms of its geopolitical significance, with President Xi Jinping declaring it the core region of the Belt and Road Initiative. Obviously, the entire Belt and Road, as far as it goes to the land connection, hinges centrally on the region of Xinjiang, because Xinjiang is the window to all of Central Asia, ranging from Pakistan to Russia. Uyghur violent resistance, including some horrible act of violence, reached a peak in 2013 and 14 with a car bombing at Tiananmen Square, a knife attack at Kunming train station, and a number of bloody attacks, especially on Chinese police and civilians in Xinjiang itself. In response to this, in 2014, President Xi Jinping declared a war on terror. Quote from a classified document obtained by the New York Times last year: "We must be as harsh as them and show absolutely no mercy." This started the inception of an unprecedented police state and reign of what could be characterized as state terrorism against the Uyghur population as a whole. And I need to clarify, while a number of Uyghurs chose to opt for a path of violent resistance against what they perceived as Han Chinese discrimination and domination, That was actually a very, very small minority. The vast majority of the Uyghurs not only remained entirely peaceful, but many Uyghurs were actually very strongly integrated into the Chinese state, serving as government officials, speaking fluent Chinese, being part of the Chinese system, doing economically very well. The Uyghurs were very successful as business people and greatly benefited from the opening up under Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin in the 1990s, especially moving into business in Central Asia. All of this changed dramatically. We can charter a police state that especially garnered pace starting in 2014 and 16, mass internment in camps between 2017 and 19, and then the long-term strategy, which I'll be outlining. The first phase, the police state, all of this began with the rule of a new party secretary in Xinjiang. Chen Quanguo had proved himself to successfully repress the Tibetans in Tibet between 2011 and 2016. In these years, he had gained considerable experience in policing, including the most advanced and modern forms of policing and surveillance and state intrusion down right to the grassroots level. As soon as he came onto Xinjiang, you can tell that this annual new recruitment of police forces increased dramatically in 2016 and 17. Now, what none of us suspected was that the mass police recruitment really turned out to be a precursor for mass internment. In early 2017, a large and growing number of Uyghurs began to be swept up in a campaign of extrajudicial internment, meaning just entire population groups, thousands, were just swept up by police and security forces with no trial, no clear reasons were given, and they were put into internment camps. German television crew managed to drive past of some of these camps, one here in Kashgar, a Uyghur region. The Chinese later tried to portray them as benign vocational training camps. You can see here the watchtower, the barbed wire, the high walls surrounding the compound, the steel, the metal in front of the windows, you know, all the security measures in place. Witness accounts from people who actually entered some of these camps, this camp was called a vocational training school in the provincial capital of Urumqi. The witness later on was able to escape the region and used a 3D modeling software to recreate their experience and what they saw. This was a camp for women. It had women of all ages, from as young as 18, 19 to as old as mid or late 70s, fully gray-haired old ladies. These were shackled with chains to their chairs. They sat behind bars, and you can see their teacher at the front with the blackboard is behind. There's a layer of iron bars between them, and outside were armed guards. In 2018 and 19, we then witnessed a massive growth of some of these internment and detention facilities as visible on satellite. Some of them increased their floor space by as much as 1,000% in the space of 6 months. This is another internment camp complex. The red lines show the increase between 2017 and 2018-19. New buildings constructed, and you see for comparison as a scale, the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, the famous one in San Francisco, which you know, since it's no longer in use, but just as a size comparison, these are massive compounds, huge compounds of extrajudicial internment camps. Now, while the internment was ongoing, of course, what happens is that in some cases, both parents were put into internment camps. So what happens to the children? At the same time as Beijing was putting Uyghurs into camps, it embarked on a campaign of what I call intergenerational separation, or the systematic separating of children from their parents. You see on this chart the massive increase in preschool enrollment. The goal here is to get as many children as possible from a young age into the education system. And then the education system was turned into a boarding school system where basically children can stay in school all week long to be better indoctrinated. And those who don't have parents, they just live on campus full time. So the state replaces parents. Now, in 2017, Xinjiang issued a new regulation by which any of these schools, including the preschools and kindergartens, all the way up to high school and university, had to implement unbelievable security measures. So you see walls with barbed wire. This is a photo taken by an eyewitness. Anti-vehicle barriers, surveillance systems. One example, in one city, there was kindergartens with a 3-tiered intrusion detection system and electric fences. I think some of these compounds are better secured than some of our police stations here in the West, or even some of our military compounds here in the West. This is another picture of a primary school entrance. This is a primary school entrance. It shows the anti-vehicle barriers, the barbed wire, the cameras in the top right, etc. One of the big things about these schools is they almost run like the colonial boarding schools that eradicated native peoples' cultures in the West. All classes must be entirely taught in Chinese. Chinese can be the only language for school management and teaching activities, including extracurricular. And there's very severe punishments if teachers or students use Uyghur. And of course, you have to understand, in these schools, 95% of both the teachers and the children are Uyghur, but they have to communicate to each other in Chinese. Witness accounts speak of a number of instances in which teachers were sent into camps, internment camps, as a punishment for speaking their native language. Now, where's all of this leading? Now, China has a long-term plan in the area not to keep a huge amount of the population permanently locked up into camps. And the estimate of how many of the 11 to 12 million Uyghur people have been put into camps range up to 1.8 million, which is about 16% of all Uyghur adults and Uyghur and Kazakh adults. So we're talking a huge campaign, but a lot of that is temporary. And there are indications that a number of these have been and are being released. The camp system was like an intermediate phase to break people's souls, to intimidate them, to indoctrinate them. There's reports of torture, of fear, of many lose a lot of weight due to very poor nutrition. So what happens long term is that people are being put into labor. Labor has many benefits for the government. They're being put into full-time work. It's called industry-based poverty alleviation. And they're put into so-called poverty alleviation workshop. All of this operates under the guise of development. Now, there are many benefits to this because the state can separate parents from their children. The state can separate parents from each other. Some of them work in large industrial parks in northern Xinjiang. Others stay in their village in southern Xinjiang. There's a separation, a breakup of nuclear families. And of course, the state is in control of what happens in these factories, right? You can't go to the mosque, you can't fast, you can't do anything religious. It's the eradication of spirituality. Anything other than the party ideology is a central aspect of this campaign. So the long-term focus is to capture the young generation and to break and remold the old generation. Coercive social re-engineering. Forced labor or different forms of coercive labor play a big role in this, especially long-term. The focus here is on low-skilled, labor-intensive manufacturing, especially textile. By 2023, Xinjiang wants to have 1 million workers in textile and garment industries and turn the area into a core manufacturing region. Again, all of this within the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. So Xinjiang produces 84% of the cotton in China, and China supplies over 20% or almost a quarter of the cotton worldwide. Almost half the cotton that's being processed in Bangladesh is from China. So you could be wearing a shirt that is connected to Xinjiang cotton, and Xinjiang cotton is processed increasingly, by ethnic minorities working in these so-called poverty alleviation workshops. So just think about that. This happens also through high-tech surveillance. A lot of the police and the security and also the local government official use smartphone apps. They have apps on their smartphones. They put a lot of data in these apps, for example, on labor status. So anybody in Xinjiang now has to be in an approved, state-approved place of work. Everyone who can work must be put to work. This is what some of these massive factory complexes look like. This is Caracas County. You see the dark shaded lines are razor wire fences separating each of the factory compounds. Visible in one, not visible here, but visible if you zoomed into one of the corners, you'd see watchtowers. A lot of these factory parks are put near the internment camps. So people can be, the people who are in the camps can be transferred directly to the labor parks. The mandatory labor system goes beyond the 1 to 1.8 million people who are in the internment camps. It captures every minority adult. Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Tajiks, etc., Hui, are being made to go through mandatory training, which includes military drill, political education, and Chinese language study. And after that, they are shipped off in groups, looks like this, wearing the same uniforms. They're shipped off by the hundreds to work in other parts of Xinjiang or other parts of China. So the forced labor system increasingly relates to other part of China, meaning that now some of our electronics, some new research is linking some of the electronics that's being assembled in Eastern China, in Shenzhen, in Shanghai, in Guangdong, in Fujian provinces. Some of the low-skill electronics assembly and manufacturing and textile making and garment making can be linked now to coercive labor by Xinjiang's minorities. The penetration of the coercive labor scheme goes deep right into villages. One of the government policies is to establish a so-called satellite factory in every other village. The goal is to get the women into work. Now, women often take care of children, even of little children, even of little infants or toddlers that are too small to go to kindergarten. But that's no problem because the government has a solution for all of this. These mandatory factories have attached nurseries where the women go in, drop off their babies, work the whole day, and then pick them up at the end of the day. Who's in control in all of this? And with every individual, the government. The very youngest children can be indoctrinated from the youngest age, from the smallest age. They learn to love the party, to sing to the party, to praise Xi Jinping, to forget their traditional culture, to forget their spiritual roots, and to move towards the party ideology and Chinese language. The example of one of the kids shown here belongs to a mother. The youngest of the 3 children that the mother has is 13 months old. And the mother now works full-time in a satellite factory. This is taken from Chinese state television propaganda, a screenshot. So what is the conclusion of all this? I have now charted a big picture from a police state, from a surveillance state, from control, from policing, from securitization, over to internment in camps, over to parent-child separation, over to different forms of coercive labor that even relate to other parts of China and other Chinese manufacturing that's being exported to us. We are becoming implicated in China's business of atrocity, in China's business of oppression, into a big money-making operation that's making billions of dollars in profit from cheap labor, and that is supplying inexpensive, low-skill products to us, right? People have tried, academics have tried to come up with a term for how to label what is going on in the region, especially with the Uyghurs. Terms are being thrown around like cultural genocide, soft genocide, ethnocide, anything that could be used to say a people is being changed, their culture is being killed, without committing literal genocide, even though there are probably high mortality rates in the camps unknown to us. But the main target here is to kill the culture, to kill the soul of a people. genocide 2.0. Troublesome is that this could become a blueprint for dealing with other ethnic or religious minorities, not authoritarian countries. Almost any authoritarian country in the world has some minority, be it a religious minority, an ethnic minority, a political minority, that's just not conforming, that's hard to control or contain. What China is doing could become a blueprint for other nations to be exported. Finally, all of this fits into Beijing's world order, establishing an alternative system to the Western-led order, expanding the spaces for authoritarianism, making human rights friendly for dictators, making human rights mainly about economic development, and removing the human rights, especially for ethnic minorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zenz. That was a super introduction for us. I know that we're getting some questions on our Q&A, but we're going to reserve the time at the end. Before we get to those questions, although please keep typing them, let me ask Rushan Abbas to step up and tell us from her perspective and her more personal approach what she's been seeing and what she wants to share with us. So, Rushan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today about this unprecedented atrocity of this century. Adrian just presented the chilling reality of China's final solution, basically, that has been stigmatized the Uyghur culture and their ethnic identities. Xinjiang is the name that Adrian mentioned, given to us by China, and it means the new territory in Chinese. But we like to call our homeland East Turkestan, as it is a historical, geographical, and symbolic name for us. Just like, you know, Tibet is being called in China as Xizang, but we call it Tibet. And also our ancestors established independent state twice in this name. First one was in 1933, and then second one again is 1945. Also, they both were short-lived because of the international politics between the major players at that time. But both those independent states were established in the name of East Turkestan. And currently now, while history repeats itself today, China is using the last drop of Uyghur blood to advance China's economy. The rightful inhabitants of East Turkestan have been basically herded into those concentration camps. There's no any other way of describing that. It is actually concentration camps. And the Uyghurs are being enslaved so that Han Chinese settlers can live in the Uyghurs' houses, take their lands, and even have their way with the Uyghur women while their husbands are in prison. China's economic power, which allows it to commit those crimes against humanity without consequences, is the result of Western countries standing by Italy as this genocide has been going on. The recent spread of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 from China, now has resulted in increased attention on China and their actions to conceal, deceive, and bribe in order to avoid any responsibility, as we are seeing what's happening today. And in spite of the current global pandemic and the catastrophic deaths because of China's authoritarian actions to deny, misinform, and punish the whistleblowers, thousands of Uyghurs are being sent across China now, like last few months, to reopen those factories while the virus is still rampant. And China is claiming the transfer of those Uyghur youths to China proper is to solve an unemployment problem. But while they are claiming that sending Uyghurs out, and they are simultaneously, hordes of Han Chinese have been sent and have been drawn to East Turkestan, lured with promises of the government, promising for homes, free education, financial subsidies, and money and preferential treatments on the jobs. Basically, they are getting the jobs while the Uyghurs are moving out for unemployment reasons, they call. And while the West is consumed with COVID-19 and the racial tensions that have arisen, China continues to stoke them to its advantage, basically. And China even revokes the West for racism right now, while they have millions of Uyghurs and the others living in hell, being treated as slaves. And all of these horrors that I am sharing are very personal to me. And I, as I have been being vocal, and I spoke at the Hudson Institute on the panel September in 2018, exposing those horrific situations and the disappearance of my husband's entire family. 6 days later, my sister and my aunt both were abducted on the same day, although they live in about 900 kilometers away from each other in 2 completely different cities. My aunt was released a few months later, but my sister is still being victimized. Just about 2 weeks ago, after more than 21 months of no information on my sister's whereabouts, Radio Free Asia managed to confirm her detention. But I still don't have any other information. I don't know where she is, what kind of conditions she's living. But what I know is that her abduction was a retaliation for my activism as an American citizen here in America, practicing my freedom of speech and my First Amendment rights. Currently, the Uyghur organizations have documented more than 500 prominent Uyghur intellectuals and people like my sister, who is a retired medical doctor, that do not need any kind of vocational training, and disappearing into the camps today. And China continues to branding all this cultural extermination as preventing Islamic extremism, and that this has proved all too convenient by their simultaneous development for the Belt and Road Initiative. And that is the main reason actually for what's happening. Xi Jinping's signature projects for the world domination, so-called New Silk Road projects. Uyghur women and Uyghur children are utterly victimized, as Adrian just mentioned. The Chinese state media recently reported that over 1 million Chinese cadres have been sent to Uyghur homes to live with them inside of their houses and supervise them. Imagine, you've got uninvited government officials coming in, moving in with you, sharing your dining table, even sharing your bed. For many of these women, the Chinese officials may even sleep in their beds. The most Uyghur men are in the camps and the prisoners. Uyghur women and girls are forced to marry Chinese men, leaving neither the girls nor their families able to decline such a forced marriage in fear of repercussion, as the rejection of such intermarriage is now viewed as religious extremism, because they are being viewed as refusing to marry non-Muslim Han Chinese. That could be the crime to send them to those concentration camps. And Chinese men are offered with government gratifications, and they such as housing, money, and the jobs for marrying Uyghur women. I call this government-sponsored mass rape. The Chinese government is also eradicating Uyghur ethnic identity by targeting the younger generations, as Adrian showed with the numbers and the pictures. While the kids, their parents are detained in the camps, there are reports over 500,000 Uyghur children are taken, held hostages in the Chinese government's state-run orphanages and boarding schools to be indoctrinated, forced to abandon their identity and to swear loyalty to Chinese Communist Party, and they are forced to recognize Xi Jinping as their God. When my sister was taken, I had no idea finding her would also lead to discovering Western companies' shocking complicity. 75 years ago, companies like Siemens, BMW, and Volkswagen used forced Jewish labor and are now once again complicit by using the Uyghur forced labor, the Uyghur slaves, making today's concentration camps a profitable venture for China. Many of the world's top companies have joined in now. In the past, many countries avoided acknowledging Nazi Germany's human rights abuse for the sake of economic trade. But back then, they tried to hide behind the claims of ignorance or a lack of access to information. They tried to tell the world that they didn't know it. But this is 21st century, and ignorance is not an excuse anymore. China is basically waging a war on our religion, on all religion actually, as it's a competitor by outlying normal religious practices and by rewriting the Bible and the Holy Quran. Imagine that, rewriting the Quran and the Bible. They announced to the world, they openly, there are news reports on that, to synthesize the Quran and the Bible in the Chinese way. How in the world can any religion be compatible with those communist atheist ideologies? China is changing the next world order while undermining the rule of law. But where is the anger of the Muslim countries? The organ transplants advertised from a Chinese hospital in Arabic come from my people. During the peak of the coronavirus outbreak, Chinese hospitals were also advertising their ability to perform double lung transplants with practically no time to wait. There was a report that a doctor in Wuhan did a double lung transplant, finding those lungs in 24 hours. In airports, there are special lanes open through security for organ transport in our homeland. There are pictures showing the airport's special dedicated line in Kashgar. While the world has essentially ignored for years the reports that prisoners of conscience such as Falun Gong and the others were used to harvest organs from, the recent development of a mandatory DNA testing for all Uyghurs adds another disturbing layer to the long-occurring nightmare. And where is the outrage from the world community? Why is the news media not all over this revolting scandal? Where are the famous rights defenders from Hollywood? Where are the feminists and the activists who are usually so vocal? Where are the rights of children? It seems when the predator is China, and when there's a money and the markets and the trade involved, virtue and morality seems like disappearing, just like they did for NBA. We all have seen history played out, and even swear during the last genocide of this scale. Never again. The world stood up and said, never again for an ethnic genocide like this. But our action is already late. Unless if we follow up as a real action to follow that vow never again, it means nothing. While millions of the people languished in concentration camps and are used as slaves, China has been rewarded actually with hosting the Olympics, the Beijing Olympic, the Winter Olympics 2022. China has been allowed a seat on the UN Human Rights Panel. China has been allowed to control the World Health Organization, and the world has now paid the price for this stupidity, as we all see what's happening in the world. The last chance is slipping away as we watch the Chinese government crack down on Hong Kong, threaten Taiwan, India, Australia, and any country that speaks against them and their violations of the international treaties, as we watch Chinese propaganda spread globally, and as China continues to use deflection as their only means of defense, and we must take them at their words. They have made it blatantly clear that they do not speak the same moral language as we do. They do not speak the moral language. They do not value the same values like the other countries. The West must not compromise further their own morals and the ideals by continuing to have a friendly relationship with this regime who is committing a genocide on our watch today. And we especially need the voices of those who have not abandoned their humanity to stop complicity in China's ethnic eradication. Finally, in light of recent events, I want to close by saying this. The United States and the other democratic societies' ability to self-criticize is what leads to societal improvement. The Chinese government has never had this ability. I hope that more freedom-loving people around the world will use their voices to cry out for us, please. The world is not listening. We all should speak out for the oppression and to stop China from undermining the democracy and the freedom of the world. The stakes have never been higher. Thank you.
Thank you, Rushan. Your passion moves us. We've had a lot of questions coming up on our Q&A feature. And so let me invite Dr. Zenz to come back on and let me pose some of these questions to both of you. I'll start with the one that I'm sure you're expecting, which is, what can we do? Raise our voices, yes, share information, but everybody on this call and on this program wants to do more than just share information. So give us some guidance, please.
Well, I can briefly start. I'm sure Rushan can add. I guess the first step really is awareness creation. It is a really good thing to spread this information systematically among your circles, on social media, in churches, in places of worship, in social groups and settings, as far, of course, as it's possible in these times of the COVID pandemic. But increasing awareness in your circles and staying informed and sharing ongoing findings, and findings are coming out all the time on this ongoing atrocity, is a really big first step. Because I think anybody who hears of this atrocity kind of firsthand, it totally changes their perspective, and they go like, how is it even possible that we haven't heard about this more before? How is that even possible? And it's possible because of a media landscape that privileges information that affects us. You know, if Joe Bloke trips and breaks their toe on Main Street down my road, that's a bigger news than a huge atrocity far away in another part of the world. So that's number one. The second one, though, is increasingly forced labor. The awareness of products that might be made with forced labor or parts or components or cotton or other textiles from Xinjiang or in connection with this atrocity. And again, for that, I'd encourage you to stay informed. Campaigns like Rushan Abbas's campaign, other campaigns, ongoing media like Twitter, people like myself, we have Twitter accounts. We share information, we share news. Organizing a protest, a boycott about Chinese products, about this ongoing atrocity. Do like a protest event with social distancing in your town. that's really going to raise awareness. Of course, we already have a protest culture going on at the moment, but I think those are two big steps you can take: awareness creation and products made with forced labor.
I just want to add one thing to Adrian. Yes, those are very important points. And there is a current bill actually introduced bipartisan group from Representative James McGovern and a few others from both parties. The Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, it's a HR 6210. Please call your representatives and ask them to support this bill. It's really important to pass this bill so we can prevent those Uyghur slaves, someone like my sister, a retired medical doctor. The product that my sister worked on is not going to make their way to United States. So call your representatives to include the Uyghur forced labor and this genocide every time when they have to deal with China. The Uyghur issue must be included in the foreign policy of the United States. Thank you.
That raises actually a question that a number of people have also asked, which is what has been done so far to combat this, to try and stop what's going on in China? You mentioned a resolution, an HR resolution, a potential law that America is passing. What has been done by the United States, and what about the UN? Have there been some actions on this?
United Nations has been completely inactive because China is the second largest donor. And China is using the manipulation in United Nations as the second largest donor and the power of the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the trade threats and the depth threat diplomacy they are currently doing. So basically being able to strong arm the world and to stop the international criticism or any kind of action. But our government is being very strong and taking actual actions. There is a bill right now at the president's desk. Hopefully it's going to become a law very soon. It's the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act 2020. And also 28 companies has been listed to sanction and who are complicit with this police state and the genocide. And also there's a global Magnitsky Act that we are pushing. Hopefully that's going to finally be implemented. So the Chinese officials who are responsible for this genocide and the ethnic eradication are going to be punished. And Adrian can add probably more.
Yes, as Rushan outlined, multilateral action by international institutions has been extremely disappointing, especially in the Muslim world. Basically kind of being bought up by China is really the short way to put this. European Union, likewise, a toothless tiger. The only real action has in fact come from Washington with the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, hopefully being signed into law by President Trump very shortly, although it does come about a year too late. So what has been done? Most has been done by Uyghur activists, the international media and researchers to create awareness, to bring media reporting, television reporting on this ongoing atrocity, including with high-profile documentations on leaked Chinese government documents, classified confidential Chinese government documents. But the government itself admits what it's doing in confidential documents, but of course not officially, it's being denied. So really, we are at the very beginning of this, and all the mistakes of 1938, including appeasement, including a useless League of Nations that does nothing, a lack of international action, America being largely, well, big countries or other countries, including European Union, being self-absorbed and self-interest. All these mistakes that were at the cusp of the Holocaust are being repeated in 2020. I'll say that again. Virtually all of the mistakes that were made at the beginning of the Holocaust are being repeated with the atrocity of the Uyghurs in the year 2020.
Frightening, frightening. Can I just ask, Rushan, can you just mention the bill that is being debated? Tell me the number again, or just let us know the number again of that HR. What is it?
HR 6210. The name of it is Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act.
Okay. There are some other questions here that are asking for more information or more details about the products that maybe we should stop buying, and if there are particular companies that are drawing on the work of the forced labor in this area, and if there's some way to be aware of where we're buying. Is it just all Chinese goods or more specifically? Can you give us any direction?
There are about 83 companies that listed by SP, the Australian strategic think tank. They have listed 83 companies, all brand names that you name it, that we are familiar today are listed. But for more detailed information, you can visit our website, www.campaignforuyghurs.org, or you can contact us. There's contact information. We can send you all the list of the companies and the products, and we have a detailed information on that. I'm sure Adrian wants to add something to that as well.
Yes, it's an ongoing situation. So as much as we would like to have a really comprehensive list, that's really an ongoing research project. We have initial evidence, especially H&M, for example, has been using a yarn made by one of the implicated companies in Xinjiang. Then H&M started to source from other parts of China of the same company, but then, of course, there's evidence that Uyghurs are actually sent to factories in these other parts. So H&M is a target, and if, as far as I know, have not changed their policy on that. Costco at some point imported baby clothes and children's clothes made by Hetian Taida, a company that was placed, some of whose products were banned by Customs and Border Protection, actually. And then Costco started to claim, well, we did an investigation, and that particular shipment did not come from the factory in Xinjiang or from the production in Xinjiang. It came from somewhere else, and it should be fine. And they proceeded to sell it. And some of them you can find on Amazon. But it's a very complicated situation. At the moment, I would suggest to just really raise awareness, create awareness, to follow any news reporting on it, including people like Rushan and myself have Twitter accounts and social media accounts, and other Uyghur activist groups, the World Uyghur Congress, etc. They have, they'll keep you posted on this. But I think for the time being, I would start to organize general awareness raising campaigns that generally raise awareness. This is something that really is going to be developed though. Watch this space in the next 3 to 6 months for specific developments and specific campaigns. And we're gonna probably be issuing recommendations as to which products and companies to target.
Super. We don't have much more time, but I just want to try and get to a couple more questions. And one of them is about what's going on in terms of resistance in China. Is there a local resistance operation in this region, or is it impossible to do?
That's basically impossible to do anything because literally it's complete police state, surveillance state. You cannot even drop a litter on the street without camera watching you. Adrian mentioned several incidents, what happened in 2009 and then in Beijing and the Kunming and all that. Well, when 2012, the Chinese government implemented the Strike Hard campaign and they shot that spot policy, and basically any policeman or any law enforcement can shoot and kill anybody and no question to ask. A teenager was running the red light, traffic light on his bicycle. Because of that, he just ran the traffic light. He got shot to kill by a local police, and there was no question, no consequences. And when people carried his body and asked local government to punished the policemen, all these people got basically what happened, you are seeing in Hong Kong. They were labeled as rioters and they were all being arrested and punished. So this is actually a few years back in 2012, 2013. And now it's absolutely, people are fighting for survival, actually. It's about staying alive for them. So whatever we could do, so we are being the voice for the voiceless. We are defending those defenseless, innocent people. So whatever we can do, and the United States and the other Western democratic countries taking action, and that's all we are counting on right now.
Yeah, the Han Chinese are largely complicit in this. Of course, they're being misinformed by the government, but also there's a really strong prejudice amongst the Han against the Uyghurs, a very little understanding for their grievances. And if the Han population really knew one-to-one what all is going on in the region, they would, I'm sure, there would be more resistance and more concern, although not nearly as much as there would be in the West. But they're not being fully informed. And quite a few Han actually support really tough action against the Uyghurs. Put them in the camps. Show them the way. Make them really integrate and stop resisting.
I'm afraid that we've run out of time at this point, but I'm really very grateful to both Rushan Abbas and Dr. Adrian Zenz for presenting this information to us. Let me also thank again our co-sponsors for this program, the Islamic Center of Long Island and the Social Justice Committee of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock, and the Nassau County Office of Asian American Affairs, and of course, the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. I'm grateful for this opportunity to try and spread word about what's going on and to, as Rushan said, try and enact the ideal that we've always talked about never again. Okay, thank you very much, and I wish you all a very pleasant day. Thank you.
Thank you.